That's okay.
Oh, that's
So
cool. That is
this
cool.
is I'm going to show first a few different pictures of the self-organization of monoatomics. This is a silver 1 ounce coin anode, and then a copper triple solenoid, what Keshi calls his Magrav coil cathode. And every time I would add more water into the electrolysis solution and disturb the monoatomic materials at the bottom, and it would self-organize into these different spirals and vortexes. This one being copper, I believe Keshi calls it CH3. I am not actually sure what the mixtures are, but the material that this orange brown stuff was made of was pure copper anode and pure copper cathode, and it was turned into this material. But once again, you can see the spiraling within it, the self-organization. Here we have copper oxide and pure white monoatomic copper. This is copper coil anodes, copper coil cathode, and the white being monoatomic, the blue most likely diatomic copper oxide. Here again in that same solution, also forming the spiral self-organization in this area, but a second one forming over here, and it's reversed the direction of the spiral. In this sealed jar, this is all copper, but underneath it you can see pinkish layers, and it's actual copper crystal growing out of it. And it's Sir Isaac Newton alchemy writings that he states this pink crystalline state of metals is when they're able to be transmutated from one element into another. Also at the bottom, you can see this yellow state of ORMUS monoatomics, or whatever single atom stuff that's made from copper, and what the alchemists and Sir Isaac Newton calls the yellow sulfuric state. Again, I don't have a mass spectrometer, so I'm not sure if that's the actual composition of this, but if it is, that alone would prove transmutation of elements, as where did that sulfur come from if it is actually copper sulfide that forms. In this jar, I found when you seal these metals in this pink crystalline state, but in the yellow sulfuric state, and then when I opened the jar, breaking the seal, left undisturbed, the jar was actually, it formed all these different almost spirally, but kind of waves, moving waves all around it. It was active for about 3 days. I'm going to have to find the video of that to show it another time. Here again, you can see some spiraling in a cup of the copper oxide. Here is a triple copper coil anode, and you can see that half of it is blue, the other half red pink, as well as going into the white state, but that what causes half of it to be turning into a red state while simultaneously half into a blue, and this red-blue dynamic always being shown, and also seeming to be formed in nature. And on some of my other coils that I've made that are more of the bagel coil style of Bob Greenier, I found on each individual wrap, on one side it would be red, the other side it would be blue. Quite fascinating. Here again, just pure copper sealed in that pink red active state. And this cloud right here halfway up the jar, that's actually floating copper, or suspended, I should say, copper or copper oxide, most likely, as it's blue, and it will just stay in this exclude or form these different exclusion zones on the top half and usually the bottom half, and then a divider in the middle. This fourth state of water that Gerald Pollack talks about so much, and that it's quite often forms in these electrolysis reactions. Here, these white tubes that you see, that those are actually self-organized, created nanotube structures of the monoatomic copper that forms off the anode sides, and they're straight hollow tubes that just grow and flow, and it's quite fascinating stuff when you see it, and how it just self-organizes and grows in very, very short periods of time with just a very small amount of voltage going in. Most of these experiments are either 5-volt AC or 3.5-volt DC going in. In this one, there's no electricity at all going in, just two copper wires connecting a gold chain on one side and a silver 1-ounce coin on the other, with the two copper wires creating two connections to them. You're creating a small differential, and you can see here off the gold, the white monoatomic gold forming this band here, going and connecting through. It's about 2 inches below the water and line of the top, and flows and connects directly to the silver from the gold. This I just had to throw in and bring up the discussion in APEC, especially the community here. So much debate and bad science on the climate change debate of whether it's man-made and how much we actually impact it. And I don't ever hear or see anyone bringing up the facts of Mars's ice caps as well as the moon's ice caps seem to have disappeared over the last couple of decades, as well as Mars now having active volcanic activity on it. I believe this no, this was just an old picture with the ice caps.
Nibiru, when it started, it follows.
Well, or just the galactic plane that they say we're now crossing.
There's another star rotating around our star in 2012. It's been documented. It's called Nemesis. It's called Cucina.
Yes, the Nemesis Planet X debate.
Yeah, I'm not going to debate it. I saw the damn thing in 2000. Okay, it's real. And, I thought it was a UFO mothership, but it's not. It's a star. And you can look up two suns on YouTube and see videos of it everywhere. People have captured it. It pops out from behind our sun. It's not always visible.
I find
and
it
it's there.
Subject,
and that's why they chemtrail, to hide it, make clouds, because there can only be one God, not two suns, not two gods.
Right, but that Mike will have to do an episode all on its own. As for electrolysis here, once again showing these exclusion zones, the bottom half of this jar forming white monoatomic tungsten. This is a tungsten ring, copper wrapped around tungsten ring, and then the anode, was also a tungsten rod, welding rod that I was using. So this is tungsten cathode, or pure tungsten anode on tungsten and copper cathode, and you see the cathode obviously bubbling up all of the atomic hydrogen here, and at the bottom half forming this layer of the monoatomics forming, or the ORMUS, and then this clear zone where the ring is of this exclusion zone separating the two layers. This being a pure triple copper cathode here, bubbling up the hydrogen, and the pure copper anode, which was a triple copper coil going down. But the green and black nanotubes that have grown off of it, and then these bubbles that start coating. And this I bring up specifically as an idea for Brian Kelly's adding hydrogen through electrolysis to the graphene aspect, is that I find in these electrolysis reactions, when the anode has eroded down and created these nanotubes and grounded itself with the base level, it then spreads its monoatomic layer across the entire base, at which point it then starts growing these bubbles, which they're no longer affected by buoyancy. Instead of floating up, they just stick and layer the anode to the point, I'm going to have to skip ahead here to where they're completely covered. And here is a triple solenoid, I guess more like a spring than a coil. To give reference, here is what they look like before going into the electrolysis reaction. Essentially this right here. And the black part is nano-coated. The normal copper outside third layer, regular copper not nano-coated, but that is what you are looking at here as an anode, only completely covered and stuck with these bubbles, either hydrogen or oxygen, and they don't flow up, they just stay encased on the anode. And here's another one, another reaction demonstrating this full layering of these bubbles on the anode side, and that this, when it was finished, the reaction was finally finished, and I took the anode out. It was pure black coating that was encased on it afterwards, after it had been eroding or corroding into the blue. Here is one of the windings of the bagel coil style of Bob Greenyer's Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project style. This I had come up with and done on my own over 9 or 10 years ago now. Just synchronicity of how things work. Here's a triple Magrav coil that was on the anode side, corroding, breaking down into the blue oxidized layers. And this yellow, so here it's showing a bit of the yellow when the reactions go full reaction of the yellow, the sulfur state. Sorry, I'm trying to flip through and find a good example of it. I don't have it in here, but it literally goes almost neon yellow. And the Alchemist said it's when the metal dies, it goes into this yellow sulfur state. And I've found that when the anode corrodes and you have a double negative going into the electrolysis reaction, that is when it will turn into this yellow sulfuric state. And simultaneously, every piece of, whether it's copper, silver, gold, zinc, whether it was white, orange, or blue, when it turns this yellow sulfuric reaction, when you disconnect the positive in and have double negative still connected, the entire solution, everything within the electrolysis reaction instantly turns yellow. Quite fascinating. And then in this demonstration, I have a copper anode cone. It's eroding into the white monoatomic nano layers, and then also some of the blue copper oxide. And then it hits the middle, this mid point, this exclusion zone area, and suddenly turns into the orange brownish CH3, I believe, or copper hydroxide. As Keshi claims, or I once again need access to a mass spectrometer to start testing these different metal compounds that are forming and verifying what they actually are, and if the ancient alchemists actually knew what they were talking about and real transmutations happening in these reactions. This connection here I have is for saltwater jar solutions with zinc strips connecting the jars, and then copper connecting some of them as well, forming all sorts of weird different reactions. But the main point of this and significance is that it's only 5 volts going into it, and there's a huge amounts of hydrogen being formed in all of these jars and reactions here, and quite feasible for just creating hydrogen fuel, usable hydrogen fuel on site before you inject it into the combustion reaction, not having to have pressurized pre-created hydrogen, where this seems, if you have the right amount of surface area and electromagnetic field through these coils, you'll get a sustainable low energy reaction that could be what Stanley Myers had going on. In this reaction, electrolysis reaction, you have a horseshoe, or not quite horseshoe, but magnet down there. But this line in the middle that you see is actually an exclusion zone separating 2 halves of this reaction, and that I have a giant LED light on the opposite side shining through, and that it was actually parted. There was a physical partition exclusion zone of pure water down this entire jar between the 2 areas. It was quite fascinating, and it seems that it was the magnet that triggered that. Here's the original cloud of monoatomic or diatomic silver coming off of the anode there, that then formed into that. Here's another reaction showing the yellow sulfur state as it got affected there, different coils. And this I bring up, I'll finish with this here, for all of you out there with the theory of everything and numbers and dimensions. That's quite fascinating. You actually have, well, the same number of angles in each number when made like this. There's a lot more to dimensional geometry than what in mathematics, basically, is what I'm getting with. And one last spiral of self-organization of this was monoatomic silver. I left out overnight in front of on a full moon, and in the morning it had formed this layer on top and this shiny reflective spiral. Yeah.
Bernie, that's awesome. That is awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that in-depth, man. That's in-depth. Do you have